All right, for our next presenter, we'd like to welcome Emerson Kopp. Emerson grew up in Casper, Wyoming, traveling to art shows across the country with her father, who was a successful outsider folk artist. She recently spent 4 years in Western North Carolina, where she received a BA in Craft and Material Studies from Warren Wilson College. She is interested in objects, process, materials, folk art, stories, people, and material culture. Outside of her independent research and scholarly pursuits, Emerson is a fiber artist and spent 3 years on the fiber arts work crew at Warren Wilson College, studying different fiber processes and using traditional and contemporary equipment. She is currently applying to American Studies and History graduate programs to follow her interest in craft history and material studies. Please give a warm welcome to Emerson.
Hi, thank you, Mike. Yeah, I'm Emerson, and today I'm going to speak with you about kudzu, also known as the vine that ate the South. I'm going to speak on its history, its uses, the contemporary craftspeople in Western North Carolina who use kudzu as a material, and how I displayed all of this in the Elizabeth Holden Gallery on Warren Wilson's campus as my senior capstone project. How do I do this? Yeah, I can do this. Yeah, okay. Okay, first a little bit about me. I'm originally from Casper, Wyoming, and as I'm sure many of you here can relate, I grew up using my hands in whatever creative processes that I could. Gardening, ceramics, drawing and painting, paper making, printmaking, metalsmithing, but my favorite was working with fibers. Sewing and knitting snowballed into crocheting, felting, dyeing, weaving, basket making, and the whole sheep to yarn process, so washing, carding, and spinning the yarn. And without a clue of what any of these processes entailed, my mom hooked me up with raw fleeces, helped me research different ways of washing the woolen fleece, and took me to local fiber festivals to get materials. My family dealt with dirty bathtubs every summer, stinking up the house with manure, and accidentally sending burrs down the drain, but I was really lucky to have parents who fully supported my craft endeavors and my very rapidly changing hobbies and interests. So I graduated from Warren Wilson in May of 2023, and I chose the school with the hopes of being on the fiber arts crew. And for those of you who don't know, Warren Wilson is a work college, so students spend a certain number of hours each week working on different crews, like on farm or garden, and admissions, in the dining hall, the library, one of several craft crews. There's a lot to choose from. And in exchange for our work, we're given a scholarship that goes towards tuition. So after my first semester, I applied to work on the fiber arts crew and got accepted, but unfortunately, in the middle of my freshman year, COVID hit, and I went home for a year. And I resumed when I returned to Asheville, and at that point, I was starting my junior year, and I really needed to think about what I was going to do and what major I was going to pursue. So I spent much of my undergraduate career swapping around majors and minors and academic advisors and transferring to new departments. And I liked every department I tried, but I was never fully satisfied with where the career end goals were. So somewhere towards the end of my junior year, I was encouraged by my work supervisor and academic advisors to participate in the integrative studies department and submit a bespoke degree proposal, detailing the name, theme, rationale for creating a new major, a course schedule, and a proposed capstone project. I called my program Craft and Material Studies, and the preparation research that went into designing the program led me down a rabbit hole that included researching and discovering my interests in experimental archaeology, museum studies, American studies, material culture, and craft studies. So somewhere in there, I discovered kudzu as a material for basketry and fiber, and kudzu as a topic for my capstone just kind of blossomed from there. So a little about kudzu and its history. There is a really long and deep history in East Asia, especially Japan and China, of cultivating kudzu and using it as a medicinal, a source of food, and to create cloth. It's unknown whether kudzu is native to Japan or if it immigrated from China, but there's a really strong industry for kudzu products in Japan. The first mention of kudzu in Japan appeared in a book of poems in 600 AD, and it is believed that kudzu starch was Japan's first cooking starch. Around 1610, the first commercial kudzu root processing shop opened in Nara Prefecture, where Japan now produces its highest quality starch. Medicinally, kudzu has been used in Japan for centuries. The starch is used to make a kudzu-yu, or a kudzu broth, to treat digestive problems, colds, fevers, hangovers, and more. And the chlorophyll from the leaves is sometimes mixed with other enzymes and also used in medicine. Japanese kudzu cloth, or kudzu-fu, has been heavily present in Japanese culture for a long time because of its ability to take natural dyes and its supposed skin beautifying properties. So now in Japan, you'll often see kudzu washcloths and things of that nature, but several hundred years ago, clothes made of kudzu-fu were used mostly for ceremonial purposes by the samurai class and other aristocracy. After a shift towards a more Western style, kudzu-fu demand fell dramatically in the Meiji period, so around late 1800s, early 1900s. And instead of clothing, kudzu-fu operations adapted by making kudzu wallpaper. And in the 1960s, kudzu wallpaper became extremely popular in the United States, even reaching the White House. Kudzu has been a part of Chinese culture for over 2 millennia, and similar to Japan, mainly valued for the root's medicinal properties and kudzu fiber. The most common preparation of kudzu in China is the diced and dried root used to make kudzu tea, which is speculated to treat the common cold, alcoholism, hangovers, and influenza, among other ailments. And according to a Chinese myth, a saint named Guatian Shi taught people how to spin kudzu fiber into thread and make clothes and shoes with kudzu cloth. So kudzu found its way to America long before it appeared in the White House during the Kennedy administration in the 60s. And almost 100 years prior, in 1876, the United States celebrated its first century as a country in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And delegates from countries all over the world visited and set up displays as gifts. Japan's display was a pavilion featuring a house and garden, incorporating several species native to Japan, including kudzu. So this is a picture of the Japanese display. And word spread of its fast growing. People flocked from all over the country to see kudzu. And while this was the U.S.'s first introduction to kudzu, this was not the start of the invasive spreading. Kudzu and many of the other plants featured in the Japanese pavilion were actually destroyed after the celebration. Kudzu appeared again in the United States in 1883 at the New Orleans exhibition, but this time it was here to stay. Kudzu's appeal as the perfect vine to provide shade for the southeast porches created a high demand, and many people bought seeds and seedlings through mail order catalogs, such as this one. The U.S. faced extreme soil erosion in the early 30s due to cotton farming methods and railroad construction, and to save the integrity of the South soil, it was decided that planting kudzu along roadsides would keep the soil intact. So the soil banks could be held together using kudzu's very large and unconstrained roots. In the early half of the 20th century, 85 million kudzu seedlings were dispersed to landowners who were paid up to $8 an acre to plant kudzu to use as a fodder and for soil regeneration. And this was when kudzu was nicknamed the plant to save the southeast soil. And we all know the next part of the story. Kudzu grew very rapidly, devouring abandoned buildings, covering railroad tracks and making them slick, pushing trains off their tracks, swallowing forest understories, and choking out native plants. And without anyone managing the kudzu, it grew out of control. So how exactly did kudzu spread so fast? Obviously, a ton of it was planted in the early 20th century, but what about the southeast and kudzu's qualities allowed it to spread so rapidly? So to understand how kudzu ate the south, we need to dive into its physical properties and botany and the climate here in the South. Kudzu thrives here in the South because we have the perfect climate, there's a lack of predators, and the vine has an ability to grow up to a foot a day in peak growing season, which is in the summer. So all those things have ensured its survival here. And in Eastern Asia, kudzu has native biological controls, such as kudzu eating beetles, bacteria, and fungi. And this is a kudzu beetle. They're native to Japan and eat kudzu. And one found its way to Atlanta after hopping on a plane. And while they haven't successfully taken off or gone on a kudzu eating frenzy, there are researchers looking into using them as a biological control here in the States. But kudzu's existence in Japan is widely controlled through cultivation and harvesting for fiber and root starch, use as a fodder plant for livestock, and the colder climate. So the impact of kudzu on the environment and native species here in the South has not been studied super thoroughly, but landowners and farmers have long considered it a nuisance. As a shade-intolerant plant, kudzu can often shade out native species in forest understories by reaching for sunlight. It forces landowners to use herbicides on soil, and many herbicides don't work on kudzu. And so that really just affects the other plants and organisms living in the soil. The root system has the ability to reject and isolate sections of root that have been hit with herbicide, and sections of that detached root can lay dormant for up to 10 years, including the ones that have been rejected because of herbicide poisoning, and then they can regenerate and sprout new vines. So now the botany of kudzu, its makeup, each part of the plant, and its abilities. Oh, that's weird. So kudzu has a very unique root system, and it grows very large, up to 13 feet long, and can weigh as much as 400 pounds. The spread of the plant is almost completely dependent on the root system. Kudzu does produce seeds, but they have a very low germination rate. And instead, kudzu vines put down nodes to grow new roots. The kudzu plant stores its energy in its crowns, or the above ground stem. So it's that piece up there that was not in the soil, lighter color. And the most reliable way to eradicate kudzu is to just destroy the crown, or separate the crown from the in-ground root system. So it's actually easier than most people think. You don't really have to use herbicides. It's a lot of energy, but digging up roots, but yeah. So there are two different types of vines on a kudzu plant, runner vines and climber vines. Runner vines extend along the ground, spreading nodes to add roots and grow leaves. And the runners grow thick and woody. They're best for basket making. And climber vines produce the most leaves, climb up structures to reach sunlight, and flowers grow from these vines in the late summer. Climbers are thinner and more flexible than the runners, and those vines are what we use to get kudzu fiber. Kudzu leaves grow big and wide with 3 leaflets. The leaves are excellent at obtaining nutrients. They can adjust their angle to face sunlight, similar to a solar panel, and this aids the plant in its extremely fast growth. Kudzu flowers are purple and smell like grapes. Mature climbers produce blossoms at the end of the summer, which then turn to seed pods. And few pods actually contain seeds, and the ones that do have a very low germination rate. Again, most of the spreading is done through the root system. Okay, so why did I choose to focus my research on kudzu? I consider myself a scrounger. I don't like to pay for food. I don't like to pay for clothes, and I especially don't like to pay for materials for my craft practices. So when I found out about kudzu and started doing my research and found out that all the parts of the plant are usable and used for all sorts of different things, and then found out about the kudzu industries that are in Japan and China, I thought I'd hit it big. I was just kind of like, why is nobody talking about this? Why is nobody using kudzu? It's everywhere, it's so abundant. Shortly after that, my supervisor on fiber arts told me that there actually are a lot of people using kudzu and a lot of people in the Asheville area. So anyways, I love kudzu. I love how abundant it is. I love that all parts of the plant can be used, and I love that there is real potential for a kudzu industry here in Western North Carolina. I also realized there are a lot of misconceptions and a lot of misinformation being spread, and overall just not a lot of general public knowledge about the plant, and I wanted to change that. So this is LB. She is the director of Kudzu Culture, which is a nonprofit based in Marshall. And their goal is to create a kudzu industry and a demand for kudzu products here in Western North Carolina. Their tagline is "Eating the Vine That Ate the South," which is just so incredible. And one of their goals is to really just educate people on kudzu and its uses. They do a lot of public education through root digging demonstrations, group vine harvesting. They hold a vine to cloth camp every summer where you can register how to learn to make kudzu fu or kudzu cloth. And they buy kudzu roots from landowners or dig them up themselves to process into starch and either turn into products or sell to local businesses in the area who use kudzu. I did a lot of research prior to meeting with LB, who again is the director of Kudzu Culture, and here she is showing me how to dig kudzu vines correctly. But I spent a bit of time with her while I was working on this project, and every time we met up or spoke on the phone, I was just really blown away by the amount of kudzu knowledge she holds in her brain. My first time meeting her, she told me that Nara Prefecture, where the highest quality kudzu starch comes from in Japan, has the same climate and is the same elevation as Western North Carolina. So this is a pretty compelling reason to start an industry based on kudzu starch here. Yeah, there's a lot of potential. It's very exciting. Another really cool person in the area using kudzu is Alyssa Sakura, and she's based in Fairview, and her practice is called the Patchwork Underground. She mainly works in basketry, paper making, book arts, weaving, natural dyeing, and she uses abundant and repurposed materials in her work. This image, like at the bottom, is one of her paper quilts, which is made with kudzu fiber. Yeah, I've had the pleasure of helping Alyssa in her garden and with some workshops and with some kudzu harvesting, and she's very knowledgeable. I'd definitely recommend taking a workshop with her if you're in the area. She's so cool. Another person is Anika, who is in the Asheville area, and she works with Kudzu Culture. She's their fiber working group chair. She organizes the Vine to Cloth camps, and her craft practice is called Fiber House Collective, and she does a lot of experimentation with fibers to create cloth, as well as lots of public programming, workshops, education. Yeah. So how did I present all of this information and research that I did? Through an exhibition. It took place at the Elizabeth Holden Gallery at Warren Wilson in March of 2023. And as a craft and material studies major, I wanted to embody craft by incorporating different modes of curation into the gallery space and making a multidisciplinary exhibition. So this looked like displaying objects in all the traditional ways. Think about like how art objects are displayed in an art museum and how that's different from displaying information in a history or a science museum. But I brought all of those together into the same small space. Yeah, to me that's what craft is. It's everything. So yeah, there was aspects of archaeology and experimentation with material, history, science, art, and a bit of sociology. So I'm going to run through some pictures from the exhibit and some of the people involved. Yeah, so you walk in and there's this really cool weaving done by Monica Wengler, who is working on weaving a burial shroud out of kudzu fiber. So that's about as far as she's gotten, and she's just working on making, individual squares to then sew together and turn into her burial shroud. I had a big timeline with like a video of kudzu kind of flowing in the wind with kind of just what I told you, the information broken down about the history of kudzu in China and Japan, and then in the US. And another shot of that. I had several baskets, some made by Monica Wengler, one made by Melanie Wilder, who is the supervisor of Fiber Arts crew, and then one from Angela Eastman, who is a basket maker in more like central North Carolina. So then I had displays showing the two different processes, one of the root digging and harvesting, and then another fiber harvesting and turning the vines into fiber. So yeah, I had images of LB showing me how to dig the vines with kind of a description on how to do it alongside. And then examples of the starch and diced kudzu root, and then a whole freshly dug root. And then here's the fiber one, so harvesting of the vines, and then going through the whole process of fermenting the vines to extract the fiber, with examples of kudzu paper and experimental weavings, the vines, and some of that big ball is the fiber. It's very shiny. I had a mural of kudzu with, kind of breaking down the botany of the plant and its uses. And then this is a piece by Alyssa Sakura. This is all kudzu. So kudzu weaving using vines, and then that's kudzu paper on there too. And then bios of all the people that I worked with and who helped me. And then I had an iPad with headphones, so you could listen to it. And I had like artists and scientists and students and just people who wanted to talk about kudzu, good or bad, like any story I recorded and you could hear. So people's experiences and everything with kudzu. And then finally I had a little spot with a table runner that I wove and incorporated kudzu into, and some magazine features featuring kudzu culture, some resources, and then a book using kudzu paper where people could just write, their thoughts about the exhibit. And then just another shot. I shared the gallery with one other student, so we split it up, and it was really cool. But thank you for listening to this presentation. Thank you, Matt and Mike.